Hello, everybody. My name is Maurice Washington. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Executive Talk. Those that are here live on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, thank you guys for joining us. Today's conversation is branding from the inside out, and Max Ratkai is going to be joining us going forward. We'll be doing this segment every other month going forward, and we're going to just talk about branding. But first of all, let's go ahead and introduce Max. How you doing, Max?
Hey, Maurice. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here, and thanks for jumping on this topic with me. Obviously, branding is one of those things that just really can't be left alone. There's so much more to it than just putting together a logo and your website. There's just so much more to it. So that's what we're discussing here, folks, is what else goes into branding besides just putting together a business and putting together a logo and a website. What else goes in there? So today's first topic is long versus short-term branding. And Max, just go ahead and actually break down to us, how do you look at short-term branding? How would you define it?
Yep. So I think this is an important consideration for any business at any level. When clients come to me, usually they're approaching me for design services. That's my specialty is kind of graphic design and art direction, and then brand consulting. And so, when I typically hear two different types of things when in those early conversations. And so folks that might be in more of a short-term branding mindset are often, looking for specific things. They're looking to move very quickly, and they're looking to drive revenue when it comes to the development of that brand. So they might say, okay, we're just starting, and we're looking to have this brand launched in the next 6 months, and we want to make XYZ amount of revenue based on that, within the first 12 months. So usually those conversations, that type of mindset is very fast and efficient and tactical when it comes to making some of the decisions around the brand. And certain considerations that are in more of that long-term mindset aren't as important in this stage when it comes to the design services that I'm providing.
Sure.
Maurice, is that true for you? How do you define this, and how do you see this show up with your clientele?
You can ask a better question. When it comes to short-term branding, this is actually, to be transparent, this is where I run into a little bit of challenge or conflict, if you will. Because the way that I go about business and what I've trained myself to do is think really long-term in a lot of things I do. Typically, when I hear a business owner in the short-term branding component of it, typically it's in the startup phase. Mm-hmm. Typically there's more of a quicker solution that they're looking for, but it's all actually associated with that revenue generation. I want to go ahead and I can skip over that. Let's just figure out a way to get through that so I can get to this, which is the revenue, right? Yeah. So when it comes to the developing, it's the suggestions that I'm offering have to be a lot more applicable now for a quicker turnaround. So that's what I notice in the shorter term branding conversations that I have when it comes to developing that brand inside. So that's just what I'm doing. And let's go ahead and jump on the next one, because it goes right back to long-term brand. In that same conversation, when I'm having a long-term branding conversation, what I'm noticing is there's a lot more decisiveness on the details. Because one thing that we're learning in is decision making as a whole shows up always later.
Yep.
So you can do a short-term brand, and those same things that you skipped over before and said, I can cut the corners on, will always show up 12 months, a year and a half from now. That same detail needed to be there actually. But in long-term branding, I feel like there's more of a decisiveness on decisions that are being made day to day. There's a slow, people always want revenue fairly quick, but also you're understanding if it doesn't come today, you're still okay. There's also one last thing here, Max, and I'm going to turn it over to you because I want to hear from your perspective as well. There is also something to be said about when challenges come along. When challenges come along, sometimes there's a bailout plan. You're like, oh, no, I'm not inside that, and you're gone. But that long-term branding, what I notice is there's also the decision making that goes along with it. There's also something that's developed in order to withstand some of the challenges they may run into down the road. So that's what I've seen from short-term and long-term. What about you, Max?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think what you're saying resonates with me. And one thing you said related to the details during this phase or during this type of mindset really stuck out to me that I find to be very true in my conversations, where clients that and businesses and brands that are in more of this long-term mindset, they really care about those details, and they're willing to spend the time and energy to move slower and be maybe a little bit more diligent and take time to do more in-depth research, more competitive analysis, and more robust conceptual development from a design perspective to hammer out every little possible detail and almost leave no stone unturned, so that they're okay spending more time and energy up front, because they know that over the next 2, 5, 10 years, that time and energy is going to save them and actually make them run more efficiently. Now, that said, I don't think there's anything inherently right or wrong about being in the short-term or long-term mindset. It all depends on where you are as a business owner, where the brand is, and what level of development you're at. And I think that actually kind of leads in to our next question here, Maurice.
Yeah, let's talk about development. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what does development matter to you, and to what level does development matter to you? And so depending on where you are, whether you're just starting out or a couple years into business, or you've been running businesses for and starting businesses for your entire career, your idea of development, what level that business is going to grow, is probably going to impact your mindset when it comes to the type of brand you want to create. So I'll give you an example, Maurice. For me, let's just say, this is a hypothetical example, but let's say, and kind of based on some real stories, based on real clients that I've worked with, but let's say you have a cupcake company, and it's a local mom and pop shop, family run business. They love to make cupcakes. They make really good cupcakes, and they're just starting out kind of in their local city. And when they're in that initial short-term phase or mindset, all they care about is letting people know that they sell cupcakes, and letting people know how to buy the cupcakes, and create a brand around that, so that they're building familiarity and trust within their local marketplace. So they might be, the asks when they come to me as far as design are going to be very different. Maybe they say, okay, we need a logo, and we want it to feature a cupcake and have these elements to it, and it needs to say Denver Cupcake Company, or whatever the name is,
sure,
whatever the hypothetical name is. We just need to be very clear that we sell cupcakes, so we can get this thing off the ground, so we can start selling cupcakes and making an impact in our marketplace. That might be the first couple years in business, and they're thinking, okay, this is more of a short-term brand. Whereas, let's say the same company comes to me after 3 to 5 years, and they say, okay, we've had a really great impact in our community with this business. We've really established ourselves in this local community. Now we're ready to franchise. We're ready to take this thing to a national level, and not only is it going to be, it's going to scale beyond just us running it if we're going to franchise this thing. But we really need to dial in some elements on our brand, our design, our marketing materials, in-shop design, advertising, all these elements and all these touch points. Well, now they just evolved into this long-term branding mindset, because they're having to think about all these little details that they didn't have to worry about before. And all those details are going to have larger implications on the success and the impact of that brand, because it's across so many different touch points. So that's kind of a good example maybe of short versus long term. And if you're thinking long term, but you're in that beginning phase, you're going to run into friction, because you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. And so just understanding where you are in business and what type of brand you're trying to create at this moment in time is really critical for me to develop solutions. What about you, Maurice? How does the development side impact the relationship and conversations with your clients?
And first of all, Max, you're sending chills up my spine because that was just that was just key. That was huge. When I think about the word, it doesn't even matter if we see does, if we see matter and to and you and a question mark. It doesn't even matter. The key word of this whole entire slide right here is development. Mm-hmm. This is actually, when we talk about the topic, which is branding from the inside out. I want everybody to think about that for a minute. You have a pattern about yourself that you do in everything. I'm not talking about you, Max. I'm not talking about anybody. Actually, I'm not talking about you, Max. We all have patterns that we've developed and that we're used to. And a lot of our patterns, if you really think about it, are contradiction. Some of our patterns are long-term minded, and that's your goal, and that's what you see. Mm-hmm. But everything we start to develop is very short-term. Now. So now you're in conflict with your own brand. Now you bring it to your business, because remember, business is nothing but your tax ID and the name that you called it until you put yourself into it. And so just like that collision course with the cupcake company, mm-hmm. Well, they were like, hey, I want to do this thing locally, and they saw some success and probably scratched their head and said, you know what? I'm pretty good at this thing. Maybe what if this thing can go worldwide?
Yep.
And this is what we're going to talk about some more in this conversation. I feel confident about is that now there's a lot of things that they may have to start over in order to address their new vision about their company.
Certainly, yeah.
And so
they might need to readdress.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. And so, like Max said earlier, there's nothing wrong with you being a short-term or long-term. It's just how is it showing up at this stage? Yeah. That's where you actually figure out if it's wrong or not for you. How is it showing up today when you're trying to make the next move? This is where the problem occurs. Which leads me into, let's talk about growth. Sure. I'm gonna go ahead and take this one. Just keying off of development. So now that's your pattern. Now there's another view and perception on growth. In this example, I'm going to take working out. I'll work back to business, I promise everybody. And working out, you have a ton of options. Typically when a person wants to grow, and this is kind of like that New Year's resolution, let's just take that as the time frame. You get in the gym, you said, you know what, January 1st, I'm going to get this thing together. I'm going to get my body together. I'm done. Right? So then you're go. And maybe let's say you get to Z and you lose all the weight that you wanted to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then after you get to Z, you just start to get back to, you're a lot more flexible in your eating habits. You're not doing the same thing. You're not working out as much because you already grew from A to Z. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now, is there anything wrong with that? No. But then you can't get frustrated if there does become a collision course. Right? So now from A to Z, now there's some who are taking, just like in that cupcake model, now let's take it back to business here in a little bit. You get to A to Z, now that person is looking for a new lifestyle based on what they have gained. So their perception on growth has a longevity to it that is different than the option A. So when it comes to business, your definition of growth, you have to be honest and you have to be extremely truthful about how you do growth in order to actually see how you're going to develop your business. You've already actually set a tone before you became a business owner. And I don't think people actually realize the correlation is you've already set a tone for how that business is going to look based on how you do life. So, and that's that branding from the inside out. So that's my thoughts, Max. What about you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I tend to work with a lot of smaller, close-knit teams, smaller groups of folks, and how those individual owners and team members show up in the business and how they run their personal lives absolutely impact and influence that brand that they want to create. I mean, if you're super passionate and this is your life's work and your life's mission to create this business, to make this impact. That type of brand that we're going to create for you, and those types of ideas that I'm going to be able to pull out and help you communicate within your brand are going to be very different than the individual who's like, okay, yeah, this is my whatever fifth business, and I see an opportunity in the marketplace to make a good amount of money, and so we're going to sell these types of products or services to this specific group of people, and then eventually I'm going to whatever aim to get bought out by a larger company or franchise, something like that. Like that brand is going to be very different based on how people are looking at their own growth and growth of the brand. And I think that even ties into this other concept here, Maurice, which is this idea of end game.
Yes.
And understanding what your end game is. And so for more of that short term, you might be looking at establishing a certain level of success and then maintaining that. At, like, kind of with your workout example, maybe you hit a certain peak and then you just want to maintain that. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially as like an individual consultant or owner or service provider, there's only so much you can do. And maybe you don't want to build out a larger team, bring on employees. There's certain complications that are involved with that. And so that level of brand that you're going to create to be able to maintain and support, your lifestyle, understanding that is critical to your end game. On the flip side, I've had conversations with people that are, kind of in this example I just brought up, literally like, yeah, we're just going to build this thing and our end game is to be bought out by a larger company. So they have some form of exit strategy in mind. I would say this is also a form of kind of that more short-term branding, where the brand itself is just a vehicle to get to that end point. However, the long-term mindset when it comes to this question, I think I see this show up as more of, okay, we're going to build it to a certain level, and then once it's made this impact, we're going to take it to this level, and then to this level, and then there's always a next level that they can take their company and their brand, and that means they're going to have more of an impact in their marketplace, greater positive impact on their customers who they're helping, and then eventually you see these brands that start to branch out into more of community efforts and national, state, local, international types of efforts where they're actually using their business as a vehicle for the greater good and providing greater services and using that type of thing to fuel this sort of brand movement. So that's a little bit more of a long-term end game. At least that's how I've seen it show up in my business. Maurice, would you agree? Is that a similar mindset for the people that you often talking with?
Man, Max, you're hitting just all the nails on the head today. It's just on point. No, you're always on point. So that's why we're here. So I appreciate you that.
Sure.
When it comes to the end game, as you were talking, what comes up to me is, you can ask any HR professional. It actually shows up in your business as to what you're really doing, because sometimes your employees that come on board may see it as a career that they're involved with. But you may have a short-term brand where you're actually about to sell out in 5 years.
Sure.
And now you as a business owner, you don't even know why you're doing this, but you're promoting sales, business. First quarter has to be $1 million and so on and so forth, which is awesome energy, but also wears and tears on the people that come onto your entity. So now you're trying to figure out, well, why is nobody understanding what's going on? Well, you may not have even articulated to your employees that this is our short-term game plan, which is in 5 years we're gone. So we really have to. That would be a key for any employees to actually understand why your communication pattern is what it is. Also, this thing shows up in policies and procedures. There are some companies that have a policy and procedure that says, hey, for the life of your business, we will guarantee that we will replace your product or service, or whatever the case is. But if you have a short-term brand and people have purchased off of your seemingly long-term business model, but realize you've been purchased because you made your money, you want to get out of the business. Well, then what happens to that policy? So there is a lot of things that show up without you. And so if you haven't taken a minute to actually understand where your end game, you are running there's a lot of contradictions that are going to show up later on when you need clients to depend on you and your employees. So take note of this conversation. This is heavy. I know, and I want to go ahead and talk about this one. And Max, we'll bring it back to you here. What should you be thinking in terms of your business? I would say this is the moment in time you revisit your vision. If you looked at your business plan, I feel like it has a lot of association with your vision, because your vision, when you created it, probably was very bold, very just grand, like, wow, you're reaching for the moon. You know how that saying goes. And any business consultant would say, yeah, reach for the moon in your vision, do whatever. Well, you did that and you wrote it down, but then you notice your normal pattern is very short term. So maybe right now there's a contradiction between what you wrote and ultimately what you said and what you're actually doing and the fruit that you're actually bearing. So this is what I would say is the next thing, is to look at everything all over again and make sure everything's in a complete alignment. What about you, Max?
Yeah, I mean, the vision, a brand vision is such an important piece of your overall brand strategy, and really critical to set that pace for you as an owner, you as a company, you as a internal team, and then also for your customers. So I couldn't agree more as far as revisiting that and just thinking about, okay, what are where am I right now in business? Am I in more of the short-term type of growth phase with my brand? Am I more in this long-term type of phase with my brand? And where do you want to go? Think about your end game. Think about what level of development and growth matters to you. And these are great questions to be asking. And I think for the two of us, Maurice, we love these types of conversations with folks. And if anybody wants to bounce ideas off of us, brainstorm with us about where your brand is, where it should be going, and just take stock of, kind of a temperature check of your brand, we are more than happy to have those conversations and would, encourage anybody to reach out if they're interested.
Sure. Thank you for that. And, I want to leave off with this here and tie up the conversation. I know it's very, very challenging, because business owners, we usually take on the world. That is our nature. But reaching out to have a conversation, to establish, understand, making sure that everything is on point is key. Max and I, that's what we do. Our job, if nothing else, to make sure things are on point, and that's what we develop. Things are on point. And as you can tell in one of our earlier parts of our conversation, the worst feeling in the world is to be a year and a half down the road and have to do something that you already could have by just checking in. Yeah. So think about that. We're gonna, like I mentioned before, Max and I are gonna continue this conversation. Our next conversation with you guys is going to be April 16th. We have a great topic. If you love this, you'll love the next one, and you'll love the next one. So just keep on joining us, and we appreciate having you here. Max, any other final words? You're good?
No, I'm all good. Thanks for having me, Maurice. Really fun chatting about this stuff. I love this kind of stuff. So, branding, it's necessary, and it's a lot of fun. Thank you again.
Well, since Max said that, we both have to get back to work. See you guys next time. Have a good one.